Well, good evening, IFL Nation, and welcome back into the lab. It is great to be with you once again on this beautiful evening that we have now made it to the weekend. Today is Friday, but nonetheless, I declare that it is Wager Wednesday in the Indoor Football League. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your night and spending some of it with me to talk all things Indoor Football League, the week that was, the week that is to come, and all the other goings on in this amazing league. For those of you who are new to this channel or to the IFL as a whole, I want to welcome you aboard to the fandom. My name is Alex Schuberth. I am a huge fan of the Indoor Football League, the indoor football game in general. That passion that I've put into my current role as lead IFL contributor for Sports Coast to Coast, which is a Pacific Northwest-based sports forum site that specializes specifically in coverage of the Indoor Football League along with its 14 member teams. Each week, our staff puts together up-to-date rosters, game previews, game recaps. You can also see where exactly to watch the games, whether the one that you're interested in is being carried on Yahoo Sports or overnight. We've got all that information for you and a lot more in the ways of breaking news, hot takes, analysis. It is really a fantastic resource that we've combined to put together in terms of bringing you as educated of an information base on the Indoor Football League as we possibly can. So the link to the forum I've linked below in the description. There you will also find the written version of this week's Wager Wednesday piece, which I've put a direct link right below that as well. So without further ado, I know I don't want to take up too much time tonight because there is madness going on in the hard court, and law requires that we are supposed to be watching that. So let's crank up the other screen here and get to our bet. We'll try to keep this as short as we can for tonight, but we're in week 2. 1 week already in the books. It's always one of those things. It's going to be hard to believe. Like, we'll be at week 6 and we'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we've already played 5 weeks of IFL ball. But goes to show you. Enjoy it while you have it. So tonight, our primary objectives: recap what happened in week 1, evaluate how our bets did. Did they win? Did they lose? What lessons did we learn? With those, we can build up our new trackers for the season, be it our bet results or trying to forecast team trends and oddities to see if there are some patterns with either teams or specific bets that we can potentially take advantage and capitalize on. So we will get those set up with our 2 new data points that we have. And then we'll get into week 2. We'll make single game picks on each of the 4 games. We've got 2 tomorrow, 1 on Sunday, and a second straight week of Monday Night Football. So we'll do single game bets and wrap things up with a 3-leg parlay attempt, our first in the 2026 season, to try to snap us out of that elongated drought without a parlay win that we went on to close out last season. Are we due for that win, or does our wait have to extend by another week? We'll find out in due time. So last week, had a couple games that pretty much, set the table, whet our appetite for the upcoming season that is to be. Season opener was Saturday night out in Fishers, Indiana. Quad City at Fishers. It was the broadcasting debut of the Yahoo Sports Network as far as their coverage of the Indoor Football League. And pound for pound, to be honest, I don't think it could have gotten any better. From the game itself to the presentation to just that crowd out in Fishers. I got to tip the hat to the Fishers, the Indianapolis community, for not just showing out in volume to that game, but making insane noise and making it such an electric atmosphere. That is what this league is all about. And really, that's the measuring stick that the rest of the teams in the IFL are going to look to follow suit with to match that level of excitement, that level of hype, and support for the teams that are in your communities. But in any event here, Quad City, last season's Eastern Conference regular season winners, going up against a Fishers team that, despite their 7-9 finish last year, wound up finishing the season with 5 straight wins to carry a pretty decent amount of momentum heading into this new season. And my gosh, they did exactly that. The first half was actually reasonably close. It was tit for tat. Fishers had a 4-point lead at the break. And then after Quad City got a touchdown to start the third quarter, it was all freight from that point onwards. Offensively, they were just killing off time, sustaining long drives, translating those into touchdowns more often than not. But the defense was what truly stole the show. Intercepting Daquan Neal 2 times, Jaden Rowe had both to earn Defensive Player of the Week honors. I think they got a forced fumble somewhere in there as well, a safety, and a game-clinching turnover on downs at the very end. Whatever adjustment that Freight defense and Dixie Wooten made, it worked to literal perfection. So the Freight, they end the season with 5 straight wins last year. For the second straight season, they open up the new ledger with a convincing win, taking care of the Steamwheelers at home by a score of 45-27. We did have the over at 89.5 for that, with our mortal Mega Max making our debut there. But unfortunately for us, that came up just a couple touchdowns short, as truth be told, we didn't really have enough possessions in that game to really have a fair shot at winning that one. That's just how those go sometimes. And it shows the danger of taking an over at a reasonably high number, like in the high 80s or more. So that meant that we carried an 0-1 betting record to our week 1 finale, which was originally scheduled for Sunday, the following day, but ended up getting postponed due to that record-setting winter storm in the Green Bay area. Gets moved to Monday, and furthermore, the decision's made hours before kickoff because of the aftermath of that blizzard, ironically enough. We played this one behind closed doors for the overnight debut of IFL broadcasting. So this was the Hall of Fame game, the IFL Championship rematch between the Vegas Nighthawks and the Green Bay Blizzard. A lot of new faces on both teams, particularly for Green Bay, with what was pretty much a remade offense. But Liam Thompson got the start for Green Bay, and right away he took the reins and played exceedingly good football for his first career IFL start, I believe it was. Multiple touchdowns through the air, multiple touchdowns on the ground, ended up earning the week 1 Offensive Player of the Week honors. Played a really good first half, along with a combined effort from the revamped Green Bay Blizzard defense. They held Vegas to 7 points in the first 30 minutes, led by 16 at the midway mark. But Vegas is the defending champions for a reason. They did not go away quietly. They finally got their prized acquisition, Josh Tomas. Finally got him going after a bit of a slow start in that first half. Vegas ends up scoring 4 touchdowns on their first 4 drives of the half. They wind up taking the lead after a defensive stop and a takeaway by the Nighthawk defense. So they turned a 23-7 deficit into a 35-30 lead. Green Bay took the lead late thanks to a touchdown from, who was it? It was Sal Manginane. Apologies if I got that name mixed up, but I will do better next time if I turn out to be incorrect there. But in any event, Green Bay gets the go-ahead touchdown with a few minutes left. The game comes down to a stop at the goal line because of course it did. After the way last year's game panned out, why wouldn't this one have etched the same narrative? But again, this time it's the defense that wound up coming up with the big play. It was a bobbled handoff by Tomas, winds up in the hands of Jonathan Ross of Green Bay inside the 5-yard line. And that was the defining play of what was a hard-fought outing for both teams in one of the more unique environments you will see in an IFL game. So Green Bay, they defend home. They get the win 37-35. Our plus 1.5 was a little bit of a sweat considering that we had a 16-point cushion, technically 18-point cushion if you think about it long enough. But we got that one through. That got us on the board with a 1-1 record. Even though we did wind up with a net loss in both flat and weighted methods. This is actually a really good spot to take a quick pause and probably answer a question that maybe some newcomers are asking, which is, hey, Alec, you had 1 win, 1 loss. That's an even record. How did you still lose money? Which got me thinking that last week when I did that quick refresher on betting terms, I didn't exactly mention commission / vigorish / juice on the odds. So in order for the house to live up to its name of the house always wins, each side of a bet usually will have that built-in, we'll call it quote-unquote advantage to the sports book. So usually each side will be said to be laying 10 cents on the dollar, which is where we got those minus 110 odds from to begin with. So the idea is that you do truly need to win more bets than you lose, have those wins greater than those losses to have a shot at coming up profitable, because of that built-in, I guess we'll call it feature. But in any event, that explains the slight negative. Our objective is to try to make that a positive with the 4-game sample that we have out in front of us. Before we get to the next little bit here, we've got Monica on the show again. Thank you so much for tuning in. Defense will be Green Bay's calling card this season. I can't say that I disagree with that. I mean, you got a defensive lineman that's got Sean Mustin, Allen Henry, Tavon Grant. As long as those 3 guys stay healthy, that is going to be a week-to-week problem for any offensive line that they face, especially at their home arena where they are just incredible at the rush center. We talked about it in quite a bit of volume last week. We'll certainly talk some more tonight about it and give that quick refresher again. But certainly a solid take there. This is our parlay tracker. Obviously, last week with only 2 games, we didn't have a chance to build a 3-legger. But this is the sheet that we're going to be used to tracking our upcoming attempts moving forward. So we'll see if we can get some early wins like we did last season and try to sustain that success for our goal of at least 4 wins on the parlays this season. As far as our year-to-date results put in a visual perspective, there you have it. We have our first 2 plotting points. So the flat method closer to that break even than is the weighted method. We sort of saw this happen last year where our more confident picks turned out to be the picks that turned out incorrect. But that's usually how it goes. It's either going to go one way or the other. Does it illustrate something about maybe the built-in mental bias of the wagers that you place? It could. Or it could just be a wacky situation where each time we do it, it winds up the same result. But maybe extended out over long term, that doesn't mean anything. But nonetheless, we have our starting point for the season. Our hope is that it only goes up from here. And this tracker will track our results of each game as far as each of the 6 different bet types. So funny thing here, if I had a nickel for every IFL Week 1 game where the underdog won, covered, and the game scored exactly 72 points, I would have 2 nickels. That's not a whole heck of a lot, but it's very weird that it happened twice. So we had that 45-27 Fishers win over Quad City. We also had the 37-35 Green Bay win over Vegas. The home team was the underdog in both, and both home teams won. And the game stayed under. So again, a lot of this is just going to be, we're starting it up. We're building it up. And as we get, 6, 10, 20 games into the season, we'll have a lot more meaningful of a sample size to draw conclusions from. But this is really the start of it all. This team-by-team trends tracker looks at each team and looks at how they specifically do on each bet type. So we see Fishers in Green Bay with their covers and their outright wins. Vegas and Quad City with their losses both outright and against the spread. And of course, all 4 teams wound up having their games go under the last time out. At least for the first little bit of this season, I also have the 2025 records for each team by bet type there as well. Some pretty interesting results here. One that you might look at, for example, is Iowa with that 5-11 ATS record, which perhaps unsurprisingly was the worst mark in the league for a 1-15 team, but they were actually tied with, believe it or not, Arizona for that 5-11 mark on the spread, which is kind of weird to me. Does that tell us that the odds makers are maybe overvaluing Arizona? Could there be some regression to the mean back to maybe giving other teams a little bit more respect when going up against Arizona in the future? We're going to have to see, but we do have some statistically significant trends to lean on here if we do want to make judgments based on last year's data. It's right there for us if we ever want to use it. The yearly results by team tracker, we'll look at our betting results specifically with respect to each team by bet type. So we got our spread pick correct in the Vegas Green Bay game. We got the over-under pick wrong in the Quad City Fishers game. And this will help us. It'll help us do 2 things, really. One, it'll help us to kind of diversify our bets a little bit wherever we can. In a perfect world, if I had 2 results for each team across spread, over under, and money line, that would give us a pretty solid data set to look back in retrospect and say, how did we do? And kind of glean some more lessons from there. But it'll also tell us, once we get deeper into the season, where are we hot? Where are we cold? Like if we start a certain team / bet type 0-3, does that tell us that we're making bad reads? Are we just simply getting bad bounces late in the fourth quarter? So we can kind of address those questions once we get to them as well. But this is a super helpful tool, particularly from the lens of one of our preseason goals of getting to at least 7 wins for each of the 14 teams in the league. So we'll be referring to this a lot going forward. All right, before we get to tonight's picks and analysis, mandatory disclaimers. The odds are going to come from DraftKings Sportsbook, as is usual. This is purely a fun exercise in entertainment. It's not meant to be money-making or gambling-related advice. No such thing as a lock in the sports wagering world, as most of those experts out there will tell you. If you would like to play along and either tail or fade my selections, you're more than welcome to do so, but please do so responsibly and legally. You got to be 21 or older to play in most jurisdictions. Practice safe gaming habits, which include setting a budget in terms of both time and money, risking only what you can afford to lose. And if you feel like you or a loved one is having trouble with problem gaming, don't be afraid to go to those resources online that provide help with that sort of thing. Responsibleplay.org is one example. Haveagameplan.org is another. There are a lot of state-specific resources as well if you want to venture into that. But just be careful out there, folks. It is a mercurial topic, as always, and I do try to be as careful with it as I can, while in the same breath, giving it the hype factor that usually comes with the world of sports betting. So that is that. And now it is time for our 4-game big board. So let's hop right to it here. Get DraftKings up, and here we go. Week 2 begins tomorrow night, 6 p.m., with Iowa going to Quad City to play the Steam Wheelers. At home, Steam Wheelers are favored by 5.5 points. The over-under is 81 in the hook, which is the highest total of the week. On the money line, if you want to go with Iowa, plus 164. And Quad City is at a more meager minus 198. This will be Iowa's first game of the season, and I think it's fair to say that they go into a situation that is far from ideal. For starters, it's a road game, which they didn't win a single one all season long last year. And you're also facing a heated rival in Quad City that is coming off a disheartening loss to the Fisher's Freight last time out. It's going to be fascinating to see how Iowa's roster begins to gel. They actually just announced their 25-man roster over on their website if you're curious to check out who's in and who's out from that roster. But a lot of veteran presence, especially offensively. Maureen Walker Jr. at running back. They've also got Andre Williams and Raheem Harvey as a couple of receivers there. Defensively, they kept a lot of the pieces that did show some promise a season ago, despite the struggles that the whole unit had. Tyler Tate, Jalen Johnson, Jared Saad, Ahmad Ross, among those that are going to be suiting up for the Barnstormer defense this season. And of course, at head coach, Andre Coles, coming off several successful seasons in various coaching roles with the Frisco Fighters and the Tulsa Oilers. So we'll see how they are able to kind of break ground in the new 2026 season. As for Quad City, I don't think you could ask for any better of a potential bounce back matchup, at least on paper. The most surprising thing for me, looking back at Quad City's performance last week, was how heavily reliant they were on the pass. Like, they barely used Jared Ware Jr. as a rusher, and Daquan Neal only carried the rock 6 times. Now, granted, you could attribute some of that to, they fell behind the deeper they got into the third quarter, so they kind of had to abandon any sort of running style game script. But I don't know. It just seemed like a weird philosophy to take. I would anticipate that they try to get that ground and pound smash mouth attack back rolling again to free up that pass game as much as it can. Because Daquan Neal is a lot more efficient, as is any quarterback in the league for that matter, when both are rolling and you can't really predict which one is coming over the other if you're an opposing defensive coordinator. So a lot to look at here. Monica chiming in as well. Picking a team playing in its first game over a team with a game under their belt would take Quad City to cover the minus 5.5. That's something that I actually agree with you with on, Monica. I'm also a huge fan of Quad City at minus 5.5. It is not my Mortal Mega Max of the week. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But highlighting this bet also helps us shed light on another reality that we're probably going to wind up seeing in this game. Starting at quarterback for Iowa is going to be a rookie, whether it's Harry Rubidoux or Ivan Corbin. That process of getting them acclimated into an IFL offense, the cadence, the timing that entails. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some guys that take that and just run with it and become successful pretty quickly. But other times, it can be a bit of an experience with some growing pains along the way. So on one end, you're going to have basically a first-time signal caller against a proven veteran in Daquan Neal. When you have that mismatch there, those usually favor the team that's got the veteran on their side. And we have another backer on the minus 5.5. We got Chris in the house. Thank you for tuning in. Hoping that you are having an amazing Friday tonight. But yeah, it's understandable why this would be the spread that it is when all is said and done. Because it is still very early in the season. I feel like this is one where if this were deeper into the season, like week 10, 11, 12, whatever, and we got pretty similar results that we got with last season up to that point, this line would easily be at anywhere between 12.5 or 14.5. Because it's early, you do have to give everybody the benefit of the doubt in some way, shape, or form. But if you're a team like Quad City that appears much better on paper, at least right now, than this Iowa team, especially at home, it just seems like the pick that makes the most sense to me of the 6 on the board here. So we'll wrap things up with this pick. Give me Quad City at minus 5.5. So that'll kickstart our week. And then later that evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we'll have the matchup of the teams that won last week, the Fishers Freight and the Green Bay Blizzard. At home, where they are usually absolute fire, the Blizzard are again underdogs, this time 2.5 points. The over-under is set at 79.5. On the money line, Fishers is minus 135, and Green Bay is plus 114. Man, I cannot wait to get a glimpse of this game. I'm a little bit down that I'm not recapping it for the forum, but you know what? I had my choice, and I took my boys in Orlando, so can't bellyache too much. But this one's going to be fantastic. It's another great test for both teams as they try to jockey out who should be considered probably arguably the Eastern Conference favorite this season. This game's going to go a long way in determining that when all is said and done. Probably the most impressive aspect for the wins that both teams got last week was on the defensive side of the football. You look at Fishers, you had those 2 interceptions from Jaden Rowe. You had the safety. On the Green Bay side, you held Vegas to 7 first half points, forced a pair of fumbles. Things got a little murky around the third quarter, giving up as many touchdowns in a row as they did. But that was just a more of a byproduct of Vegas's talent, actually breaking out. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be, whoever scores more points is going to win this game. Forgive my John Madden-isms, but that's the reality here. For Fishers, Felix Harper looking to keep the train rolling. And he engineered the offense pretty darn well last week. Really only had one miscue, which was a third corner interception that was on a deep ball in double coverage. So as long as he's able to keep those haphazard decisions to a minimum, we could expect Fishers to come pretty darn close to maintaining the level of offensive efficiency that they showed in Saturday's win, along with what they showed to us throughout their 5-game winning streak to close out last season. From the Green Bay front, Liam Thompson was very good last week. A lot of folks out there, though, might be looking for Green Bay to open up the playbook a little bit. A lot of what they did against Vegas was run, or do those, quick hitch pass, screen pass, shovel passes out to the high motion receiver, things like that. At which point do the Blizzard feel comfortable enough maybe taking that deep shot on first, second downs? It's going to be a really fascinating question to answer as the season moves along here, and perhaps might get some sort of an answer as soon as this game right here. I was very back and forth about this in terms of what I want to do for my bet on the single game. Green Bay's got that insane cover streak at home. Now with 20 wins and 1 push out of their 28 home games in the IFL betting era, covering at nearly 75% at home, which is absolutely ridiculous. But it's either you're going against that or you're going against Fisher's 6-game cover streak, which is right now the longest active streak in the league. It's like picking between, a nice vanilla or chocolate ice cream. It's ice cream either way. Both are amazing. I can't pick one or the other. So we're going to default here to the point total. And I believe that we're going to have a pretty closely fought battle that results in under 79.5. We've already seen both defenses play lights out this season. Multiple takeaways, like we said before. Star players really coming up and making some big plays. Another aspect to consider here is that this will be Fisher's first game on the road this season. So they obviously looked fantastic last week in front of their home crowd. How much of that momentum will they carry into a hostile environment? Especially now with Green Bay getting their fans back into the stands after being forced to play behind closed doors on the last time out. But yeah, this really comes down to both teams stay under 40, and you should be in pretty solid shape. And I think both defenses have that capability of doing exactly that. Especially with Green Bay's offense looking a little bit limited in terms of their scheme. It worked out well last week. They ended up getting the win, but they very easily could have lost had, Vegas kicked the field goal to win the game and taken care of the ball in the red zone. But in any event, that's going to be my pick. We're going to ride with the week 2 unders. We kind of went against the week 1 unders. But if you combine those 2 weeks across the 3+ seasons of IFL betting, first 2 weeks, the under is 20-7 now, if we include last week's results. So we'll ride that here, under 79.5 in what should be a really, really good Eastern Conference battle. So those are the 2 games for Saturday. Sunday's game is a standalone game with the 2 freshest brands in the league, the now Orlando Pirates, playing their first game as Orlando after spending their first 7 seasons in Massachusetts. They now go up against the New Mexico Chupacabras, who were formerly known as the Duke City Gladiators. The first arena football game in Tingley Coliseum in quite some time. We'll see the home team, again the underdog, by 5.5 points. The over-under is 78.5. On the money line, the Pirates are minus 198. The New Mexico Chupacabras plus 164. Now, before we get into the analysis of this game, I do want to make note of a line change here. So when this market first opened, the spread was 3.5 favoring Orlando. And the money line was, I think, somewhere around minus 155. Literally, maybe even 2 minutes after I hit the post button on the forum to upload my written analysis, the lines changed to what they are right now. So it goes to show you, odds and lines are always subject to change. So bear that in mind if you go about trying your luck with these. But as for the game itself, should be very fascinating. Orlando coming off a rather disappointing 7-9 season last year, their first losing record, first season in franchise history where they didn't qualify for the league's postseason. It was really a year in massive flux, really as a franchise and as an organization. They had some last-minute coaching changes right before training camp. deeper into the season. So they were really trying to piece things together on the fly. And, to their credit, they did respectably well in that regard. But in the end, it was just too much to overcome. They lost 3 straight games last season, and that really put them out of the running for any sort of shot at a return to the IFL National Championship after making it there with an insane run in 2024. The head coaching staff, or the head coach, along with the coaching staff, is pretty much brand new and arguably an assembly of the Avengers. Rob Keefe Rob Keefe as your head coach, Rod Windsor as the offensive coordinator, Toby Johnson as the assistant head coach / defensive coordinator, Les Moss also on the staff manning the offensive line. So there is some serious brain power in Orlando these days. As for the players, they ended up retaining a lot of the best pieces that they had from a season ago. Last year's rushing king, Puka Williams. Their receiving room now has incumbents Isaac Zico, Tio Redding, Thomas Owens back from retirement, joining the Pirates for another season. And they also got Naquan Murray. So that rotation of receivers is going to be really fascinating to watch for either Tolia Tagovailoa or Paxton DeLaurent. One of those guys should wind up being the starting quarterback for the team. So that's going to be very interesting to see how they wind up doing it, if they can improve on last year's offensive efficiency, which, to say the least, was not consistent a season ago. With New Mexico, it's a very fascinating team that they've built there. Jerome Johnson, your 2024 league MVP, is the starting quarterback. They've got some other pieces in place there as well on the offensive side. Defensively, they're headlined by a couple of really solid names at linebacker / defensive back. They have familiar New Mexico man Jason Serta, along with Wesley Bowers, who comes over from Bay Area. So this is going to be a very interesting game. We're going to find out a preliminary look at how these two teams are going to pan out throughout this season. But now is the time where I have an insane stat for you, for the viewers out there. So the Pirates, in the past few years, they've had a bunch of games against the Western Conference. They've actually lost 9 of those in a row, dating back to, I think, midway through the 2023 season. So it's been a hot minute since they've taken on a Western Conference team and ended up taking the victory. They've had some close losses, some not so close losses, if you know what I mean. But really, this game is about, for the Pirates, kicking that hoax, getting the season started on the right note, and going into what should be a really fun environment on the road to see if they can take down New Mexico. The Pirates, historically, also not the best team on the road either. So the fact that they are getting points here, even against a resurrected / expansion / whatever you want to call it, New Mexico team, there's an opportunity here to go very contrarian and potentially get rewarded for it if some of that adverse Orlando history and trends come back to light once we get to this game on Sunday. So I say let's swing for the fences. Let's take New Mexico plus 164 money line. This is the mortal mega max of the week. We are pulling no punches in week 2 on our IFL bet card. 10 straight losses against the Western Conference for the Pirates. We ride streaks here. Let's ride. Monica chiming in as well. Grandparents live in Albuquerque, and you're going to the game. That is amazing. I'm sure it's been a hot minute since you've had a chance to attend a game. I hope you enjoy it. It's always an electric atmosphere, regardless of where you go. So yeah, like I said last week, every so often we go bold with these. This is probably going to be Exhibit A. I'm ready to look like a fool if we get like a Bay Area Panthers level Rob Keefe style team and Orlando winds up winning big. But you know what? If that's what happens, so be it. But for now, we ride the streak. New Mexico plus 164, and we'll see if Orlando's Western woes continue. And to cap off the week, actually, why does that say Sunday? I'm convinced that should be Monday, so ignore that. Monday night, 9 p.m., Northern Arizona at San Diego. This would, I'm sorry, give me a sec. This game features two teams making their 2026 debuts, with the Strike Force favored by 6.5 at Front Wave Arena. The over-under is 77.5. We've got plus 185 for Northern Arizona on the money line, and for San Diego, minus 225. Chris chiming in as well. Wouldn't be intense if some real pirates battled some real chupacabras. I would pay to see that. Well, I will say there's an opportunity in Tingley Coliseum on Sunday. Could see it there. I like that though. That was a really nice icebreaker. So back to Naz and San Diego. This is a really fascinating series that I looked at. Some games very closely contested. Others very, very entertaining. I don't expect this one to deviate too much from those tendencies. But Northern Arizona, they're coming off a rough season last year. They went 2-14, pretty much lost the entirety of their roster and coaching staff from the prior season. So there was a lot of opportunities for players to come in and kind of make names for themselves, which, to their credit, I would say about half the roster is carryovers from last season. Ramon Atkins at quarterback, Nolan Sussel at running back. You also got Kobe Smith and Marlon Cook at the receiver position. Losing Deshaun Sotomayor to Vegas is going to hurt a little bit. But still, you're talking about really good running back, really good quarterback, and two very reliable receivers forming the nucleus, a pretty experienced one at that, for the Wrangler offense. They also retain, I believe it was 4 or 5 of their 8 starting defensemen from the latter part of last season's run. So they did what they wanted to do as far as kind of like their long-term objectives. Last year was always going to be a challenge stringing together wins. But they're confident with head coach Ron James that, they have a starting point. And it's going to be very tough in this upcoming matchup with San Diego, a team that has been in the Western Conference Championship each of the last 2 seasons, coming up just a fraction short in both, in their quest to represent the Western Conference in the IFL National Championship. But like Northern Arizona, San Diego also has a lot of pieces that are coming back, along with some reinforcements that they've added throughout free agency. So as far as their players that are back, Nate Davis, the ageless wonder, Eddie Vander, the two-way running back. You also got Arthur Jackson, Shane Hooks at receiver. You add Cole Blackman, big-time playmaker from the Tulsa Oilers. Defensively, Ifeanyi Mahe on the defensive line, Elijah Reed in the backfield. So Taylor Jennifer's squad, they're going to come out firing as they have been known to do the past couple seasons. So it's going to be a really fascinating game, an awesome atmosphere. My pick for this game, Monica has San Diego at the minus 6.5. That's certainly not a bad bet. You're getting it below the key number of 7, which more often than not can make a difference. I want a little bit of a different direction here, though. Not necessarily on the spread, but we're going to go with the point total for the second time. I think we're getting another under here. The 77.5, when I first looked at it, it did give me a little bit of pause. But the reality is that this is the first time both teams are playing this season, which, as we've seen, usually leads to, for lack of a better term, more conservative game scripts. So as long as we avoid like those random big plays or short fields, things like that, something like we got last week, like a 42-31 score, something along those lines, that would be perfectly fine. Just as long as you stay below that 77.5 number, that's 11 touchdowns plus all field goal or plus all extra points, we would still stay under. So that's another key number difference right there as well. 77.5 and 76.5 would be two entirely different propositions in my mind. But in terms of this season series history, from the lens of this bet, Naz at San Diego has stayed under this number 3 of 4 times in the IFL betting era. I think we've had, 67, 69, 74, and I think the one game that went over was like 99 or something like that. Back in 23 when both offenses were seriously buzzing. But yeah, I mean, both defenses have some talent, have some experience. So it's going to be very interesting to see on a nice Monday night in San Diego. So give me the under at 77.5 for that one. All righty. So unlike last week, we do have a shot to put together our 3-leg parlay of the week. So what is that going to look like here? I thought about this quite a bit. I didn't know which games I was going to include, which game I would ultimately exclude. In the end, though, I decided to start things off with the old tried and true. Green Bay spread at home. Across the entire population, this is covered at 75%, basically, for crying out loud. Even with Fishers covering 6 in a row, like, how can you go against, basically 3 years worth of this sort of a sample of dominance for Green Bay? It's going to be tough. They're going to have to raise their offense to another level. Defense probably will have to as well, if we're being honest. But, I mean, Green Bay on the spread has been insanely profitable. So we've kind of avoided it for our single game bet, but I'm more than willing to throw the dart, roll the dice as far as getting a parlay started. Certainly could go either way. Like we said last week, we never know if we're going to need that plus 1.5 or plus 2.5. Could have seen it play out last week if Vegas had held onto the ball, set up a field goal to win the game 38-37. That still would have won us our bet. So maybe the same thing happens here in a bit of a fist fight of a type of game. One where we're also going with the under as well, which actually, if you wanted to same game parlay that option, basically 5-2 payout if you'd like that. So for our exercise here, I'm going to stick with the regular parlay and move on to our second of the 3 legs, for which I'm going to go Orlando, New Mexico, under 78.5. Am I taking all of these unders as maybe an overreaction to what we saw last week? Maybe. But it's still, the second week of the season. A lot of teams are going to be playing their first games of the season, this week, next week. So there's that element to consider as well. There's also the historical component too. Orlando, right now, the best active team to the under in the past 3 years. 32-19 to the under. The new head coach that they got, Rob Keefe, 32-20 to the under as Bay Area's head coach since 2023. In games that have featured new / expansion / resurrected teams, if you want to call it, those have also been historically very low scoring. We saw Fisher's inaugural game get to 70 last season. Tulsa's first game in 2023 had a total of 48 points scored. Vegas's inaugural game in 2022, I think 30 or 33. It was a very weird game. I think it was like 26-7 or something like that. The Vegas win over the Wranglers that year. But case in point, there is a lot of historical precedent in a matchup like this where the under makes every lick of sense. So we'll make that our second leg. And our third leg on Monday, to hopefully bring this thing home, will be San Diego on the money line. We are eating a significant amount of juice with this, but I feel like this is a perfect time to say, okay, let's not overcomplicate it. San Diego's been really good at home this year. This is a fine matchup against a non-playoff team from last year. Let's see if they can pull it out outright. No need to mess with the spread at all for this one because we still hit our minimum odds requirement, as you can see. But yeah, there's a reason why they're favored by basically a touchdown. They've been arguably one of the more consistent teams in the entire league over the past 2+ years. So I say that wraps up our parlay here. So it is a plus 426 proposition right now. Our minimum odds requirement for the purpose of the series is going to be plus 400. If you were to put $10 on this, your return would be $52.64 over on DraftKings. If you did want to potentially boost that, there is the daily drop. That is either a 20% boost or a 30% boost, depending on what they actually want to give you. So you can use that there. I'm going to evaluate these as part of our tracker at the true odds. So we're not going to apply any boosts or anything like that here. But from a more practical standpoint, that is an option for you if you have a DraftKings account and you're in a state that offers IFL betting. So to wrap up this parlay, we've got Green Bay at plus 2.5 at home. We have Orlando, New Mexico under 78.5 at Tingley Coliseum. And we have the Strike Force defending their home turf at Front Wave Arena against the Northern Arizona Wranglers. Plus 426 on that one. And we got a good question here from Chris. Do you think the lower unders overs are an indication that DraftKings is feeling early season games are less likely to be low scoring? They seemed higher in past seasons in the early weeks. Definitely so. I've actually talked about this a little bit with one of my friends, Trey, who's the mastermind of the Off the Wall podcast. And we've pretty much put that as a hashtag at this point. Week 1 unders, week 2 unders, which really made the point totals of last week relatively surprising to me. Like, I know, last year's playoffs were, a once in a generation type as far as entertainment. We had the Eastern Conference and Western Conference championships. Both teams scored 60 plus basically. Both teams scoring 60 plus in the IFL Championship. It just did a mad dash across the finish line last year as far as offensive efficiency goes. But even with last week's game between Quad City and Fishers, it's like even with both teams having retained a massive portion of their respective rosters, we still ended up getting a pretty cagey game script. And that might have been matchup dependent too, where, these are probably going to be 2 playoff teams once we get deeper into August. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. We're definitely seeing that adjustment with this slate of games right here. I was not expecting it to be pretty much 2 touchdowns per game. But maybe that was an indication that the initial 2 games that we saw last week were maybe put a little bit beefier of a total than they really should have. And in all retrospect, had I gone the week 1 unders, for both games, I'd be looking at a 2-0 record and sitting pretty right now. Which actually, closing note, fun fact, week 1 games have gone under 7 consecutive times. Something to file away in the old cabinet, if you will, once we get to the 2027 season. A little something to consider. But yeah, definitely a good point. Definitely good talking point for sure. All righty. So that will do it for tonight. We can get on out of here and back to the world of college hoops. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in, getting a sneak peek at some of the games upcoming this week. Double the fun, 4 games versus 2. It's going to be awesome. For those of you who are placing bets as well, wish you the very best of luck, whether you're tailing or fading me. And if all goes well, I'll see you at the cashier. Have an awesome night.